Welcome to Hormones with Sam, your guide through the confusing world of hormone health. I'm your host, Sam Beau Patrick, here to help you demystify and unlock the secrets to living a vibrant, happy life. Together, let's make hormones fun and sexy. Hey, and today we're going to be talking about saliva testing. Now, let's talk about different body fluids first, though, because we have things like body fluids that we can measure to determine what's going on inside a person's physical self. Saliva testing is one way of measuring hormones. There's also urine, blood testing, and we can also do it through sweat. When it comes to sex hormones, though, such as estrogen and progesterone, we want to get the best information possible, and saliva testing is the most accurate way to do that. Now, that's because those hormones in the bloodstream bind to something called serum hormone binding globulin, or SHBG. Now, I'll test you at the end of this, so take note of that word. No, I'm joking. It's very technical. It's a biochemical thing, but that's just the way hormones actually bind in the bloodstream. Now, if we're to do a blood test to try and measure those hormones, basically what we're going to be measuring is your SHBG levels, bound hormones, which is pretty useless data. It's not telling us what hormones are active within your body, and that's what we really want to know. So saliva testing is the most accurate way to do that. You see, what doesn't bind to the SHBG is free floating, and it's that stuff that is the active part within your body. We can also measure testosterone that way, DHEA and cortisol. You can measure cortisol on urine test and a blood test. Once again, my preference though is saliva testing. I highly recommend doing a saliva test today. The validation that it offers people, the information that it gives you, the steps to improving your hormones is invaluable. If you are taking external hormones, hormone replacement therapy, HRT, or if you're on the oral contraceptive pill, you need to consult with someone first to get them out of your body and then do the saliva test. If we do the saliva test and you're taking HRT, all we're going to be measuring is the HRT. We want to know what your base levels are doing so we can help empower you to find that balance naturally. Other things that may affect it. The Mirena, probably not. A Mirena works quite locally. It does seep out little bits of progesterone, but it's very unlikely to affect your saliva test. Similarly, with the copper IUD, that won't affect your systemic hormones. That is just a mechanical device. And if you're on thyroid medication, also it doesn't affect your sex hormones. So apart from HRT and being on the pill, you can do a saliva test at any point in your life. Men can do it. Women can do it. Children can do it. Teenagers can do it. So the sort of things you might consider doing it for is if your teenage daughter, or you might be a teenager listening to this and you've got PMT, or you've got acne, or you get depressed and just want to end it all just before your period. Sleep problems. Perfect for that age group to find out because you're setting up a lifelong health habit. So it's very important at that age, boys and girls, teenagers, to have a saliva test. During your fertility years, if you can't fall pregnant or you're struggling to become pregnant, really important to do a saliva test. It's the most accurate way. It's going to give you the most information about what's happening in your body and why, or possibilities, why fertility is not occurring, particularly if you've got high testosterone. It'll give you that data. Remember, testosterone is the main reason why women in this country aren't falling pregnant or becoming pregnant. Men as well, who are on the fertility journey, also need to know what their estrogen levels are doing. I found with men who are struggling to, there's two people involved, let's say with a heterosexual relationship, trying to conceive. Often the man now is equally at fault with hormones as the woman. And the main reason men are struggling with fertility is because they've got low testosterone and high estrogen. And we'll address that in a podcast because it's instrumental that the man knows what his hormone levels are doing. And if his testosterone is low, we need to get it up. And if his estrogen levels are high, we need to drop it down. When that happens, magic happens in the fertility space. Another time when men might want to check their hormones is when they go through what's called andropause. And that occurs naturally after the age of 35, 37, their testosterone levels start taking a dip down. When our men's testosterone dip down, a lot of other things dip down, if you get my drift. Their moods, their libido, and they can end up becoming those couch potatoes. It's quite unavoidable. Saliva test is we'll pick that up, and we can put in strategies to make sure that testosterone stays nice and robust. Obviously, women going through menopause, I think it's absolutely essential that you do a saliva test. An anti-aging strategy might also be to find out what your hormones are doing, because our key drivers for keeping our bone strength strong are exercise and estrogen. A saliva test is going to give you that information. So even if it's been a while since you've been through menopause, have a saliva test, see what's going on inside your body from a saliva perspective, and then you can put in strategies to make sure you stay healthy and strong, hopefully till the day you go. Now, I'll tell you a story. Back in the year 2000, because I've been around that long, doctors would refuse to measure sex hormones when patients came in to see them in general practice. Patients would go in and say, I want my hormones checked, I feel like this, and they'd go, no, it's a waste of time. So the habits back in those days were, and the narrative was, it's an absolute waste of time. There's no point measuring your hormones on a blood test, and they'd be sent on their merry way. With consumer demands and information, people are now going into doctors saying, I want my hormones checked. I'm pretty sure my hormones are out. And doctors are succumbing to that pressure, measuring hormones, and they used to say it doesn't, it's a waste of time, but now they're doing it. And unfortunately what's happening is people are getting results that are inaccurate or not really reflective of what's happening of their sex hormones. It's important that we use the right test to measure the right hormones. Now, if you want to measure insulin levels, then you do a blood test or a finger prick test. If you want to measure your sex hormones, you're best doing a saliva test. If you want to measure adrenaline and things like that, unfortunately, you're going to have to become a lab rat because there isn't any quick testing that will do that for you. But I will just do a little bubble out here. There's a test called Braverman. And Braverman was a scientist or a research person years ago who has a really nice, it's about 8 to 10 pages, a questionnaire where you can tick it off. Now, it is subjective. It's your information. But he looks at things like GABA, dopamine, acetylcholine, and their hormones as well. But that test is done just a tick box. And I might put a link below just so if you're curious, you can see, because sometimes we're missing those hormones as well, and it's not our sex hormones. Now, saliva testing. What actually happens? What's the process? Once you've ordered your saliva test, what will happen is it'll be sent to your post box or your address, and you'll be given a little tube. Now, if I want to measure different hormones over the day, you might be given 5, but typically you'll receive 1, and typically I only measure through 1 test tube. It comes from a laboratory. I use a lab currently down in Melbourne. In other countries, I use other laboratories, and they're all accredited and all have to go through their annual accreditation. You get the little tube. Ideally, we do the test first thing in the morning. Upon waking, you can rinse your mouth, create saliva. Now, if you never hear this again, just take note. This is what's called milking your saliva glands, because you need to produce saliva. We don't want spit. We don't want stuff. We want saliva from within your mouth. Now, inside your mouth, if you flip your tongue back on itself and go underneath, there's all those squashy little things. They're where your saliva glands live. Now, if you can create a vacuum inside your mouth with your cheeks and turn your tongue on top of itself and squash those saliva glands, you can create saliva. That's called milking saliva. It is probably not going to be beneficial for anywhere else in your life except for doing your saliva test. But it's good information to know. You spit into the tube, write and date it. It gets posted back down, in this case to Melbourne, and it takes about 2 weeks to get a result. The information is game-changing. What you'll find on a saliva test, which you may not have discovered anywhere else before, is validation. You'll find that your estrogen levels may be out, your progesterone levels may be out, DHEA, cortisol and testosterone. When you have that information, we can put in meaningful plans so you can, pretty black and white. If your progesterone's low, we need to increase it so you'll feel balanced. If your estrogen's high, we can do things naturally that will drop it down. Here's a little warning if you're going through menopause. If you're going through menopause and you go to your GP and say, I think my hormones are out, and they do a blood test, be really cautious of the information you get because it's highly likely to be inaccurate. If it shows that your estrogen is low, they may offer you HRT and an estrogen replacement. If you go and do a saliva test and it shows that your estrogen is high, we know that you are contraindicated to have that estrogen replacement. Saliva testing is the only way you're going to get that information, and you'll save yourself a world of pain by doing that extra step. Now, unfortunately, in this country, Australia, saliva testing is not covered by the government and it's an out-of-pocket expense, but it's one of the best investments in your health. The things I hear from people when they do a saliva test is, it changed my life. For the first time in my life, I had information that showed me that I wasn't going crazy, that it was my hormones. I've had men come up to me and say, thanks for measuring my wife's hormones. I thought she was going crazy, but clearly she's not. Her hormones were out. It's a very simple test to do. You do it on a typical day. We don't want it to be when you're relaxing around the pool. We want it to be on a typical work day. You wake up first thing in the morning, rinse your mouth, no coffee, no toothpaste. We want a virgin spit. Now, into that little test tube, as I was demonstrating before with how you milk your saliva glands, you fill that up to the top, label it, put your name and date on it, and it goes back in with the reply paid to the lab that it was ordered from. It takes around 2 weeks to get that result back. Once you get that result, we'll email out your result, and you have an option. You can have a consultation with me and you can purchase that straight away when you order the saliva test, or if you're in one of my groups, you'll have the opportunity through my groups to ask me about your results. Having a saliva test done is one of the most powerful ways to look after your own health, to find out what's going on inside your body. The information it gives you is second to none. It's the most accurate way to measure your hormones. Otherwise, you're really guessing. And a blood test, as we've already discussed, is pretty much a waste of time. In fact, having a blood test, because it isn't the right way to measure your hormones, can really throw you off the track of what could be a hormone problem and stop you from getting the information that you really need. Some frequently asked questions about the saliva test are the accuracy. How accurate is it versus a blood test? Well, WHO recommends a saliva test for sex hormones over a blood test, and that's because of the way the hormones bind in the bloodstream. Blood testing for hormones, sex hormones particularly, considered a bit of a waste of time and quite misleading. When we do the tests, we want to find out what the free, unbound hormone levels are doing, and saliva is the best way to get that information. Another frequently asked question is if you're having a cycle and you're doing this to measure your sex hormones and determining whether your cycle, if it's too long or too short, what's going on, what time of the month should you do it? Ideally, you do it on day 19. Now, day 1 is considered the first day of your period when you start bleeding, and then you count forward from that to day 19. Day 19, day 20, day 21. If you're having no periods at all, you can do this at any time in the morning on a typical day. If you're having a 2-weekly cycle, try and get it before it starts again, because the information that we're going to get from that test will help us start a plan so we can start lengthening out and balancing your hormones so you can have a normal cycle again. I really love saliva testing because it's very stable, and the hormones in saliva are also very stable. Unlike a blood test where you've got to go and have a jab and that can coagulate and all sorts of things can go wrong with blood sampling, saliva test is incident-free. As you can see, having the information for a saliva test is going to help empower you, validate you, and come up with the best health plan for you to live a vibrant, healthy life. I'll put the information below on how you can order your own saliva test, and can you leave a 5-star review on our Apple podcast and Spotify so other people can find this wonderful information so that they too can have hormone balance.